you're making people laugh, and it's it's a fun moment, and it's like, no, it's a awkward, icky moment of an interruption that I'm handling, but my show is better than you interrupting my show and me mocking you.
Greetings, everyone. Come on in and have a seat up front for the Funny Muscle Podcast. If you're here, then you're looking to learn how to create laughs like a pro. So please help me welcome to the stage your co-host to help you do that, economics professor and open micer Chris Stifler and comedian turned author Mike Lukas.
I don't think like learning comedy is linear at all. I feel like I was plateaued for about 2 months, and then this last 2 weeks I went again. Like
Yeah.
seeing comedy or seeing the lens or like that, seeing jokes a lot more. Like it's like I don't know, my eyes are much wider. I'm excited.
Good. To me, it's when you begin to have a vernacular, when you begin to have a methodology, and then you talk about it, you look at it, you apply it, you break down things using it. Eventually, it just sinks in. You start to go, oh, I get what we're doing. Oh, I see what this is. Oh, I see. And then that's the golf swing, and then eventually you're trying to swing the golf swing without thinking about it, but first you got to know what the golf swing is, all the different parts of it, like you were saying in your article. And that is so hard to do on your own sometimes. That's why having a coach or a mentor, or at least watching people, if you're intuitive on your own and organically funny, you can watch other people do the craft of stand-up comedy and kind of get the picture of what they're doing. But still, it's when you're tweaking, it's nice to have vernacular terminology.
I'm interested even just as someone who does a lot of town hall meetings or public presentations or talks about taxes where that can flip on like a very conservative or a liberal kind of like I'm gonna be your adversary. I'm gonna question your talk. I'm gonna question your data. And then it's like the skills of kind of like dancing with your heckler is different than like let's go butt heads and
Yeah. And the thing is like what I did, like I could tell you the story about the bucket boy. I call it the bucket boy bit. There's a bit, like a kind of a hack, tit for tat heckler response, where you say, okay, like heckle me.
you look like Mr. Clean if he had cancer. What are you doing on stage?
Sir, I'm trying to do my job, okay? And you're interrupting me. I don't go to where you work and knock the dick out of your mouth.
Does
So that's like an old, you know,
that put you on like are we button heads? Are we gonna be adversarial
exactly.
then for the rest of the
Exactly.
day?
So now you say that to somebody, and now it's a tit for tat. It's a You're playing their game, which is you suck, you swallow, and you're if you're not a really good roaster, that might not go well. And then even if you are a good roaster, now your show is about roasting, and if your rest of your show isn't about that, now that's how they're going to expect it to go. So it can kind of backfire. So what I always do is I was like, oh, I'm going to do my version of that bit and embarrass them about where they work, but bring them into the show. So at one point, someone said, "Buff your head for a nickel." So I went through a whole bunch of like the first thing I did was, well, you're part of the show. Well, congratulations, that's very brave. Like, most people came to the show and just said, "I'm going to sit back and watch," but you're like, "Oh, look, honey, I got a good one. You see, he's got a bald head. Well, remember when I used to make a living buffing heads? I'm gonna let him know or whatever." And then I start to like make him sound stupid, but in a very encouraging way, like as if I'm congratulating him. And then I said, you'll probably be after the show by the doorway, greeting all of us as we come out. Hi, I was part of the show. Nice to meet you. I was above your head for a nickel. That was me. Yeah, it just came to me. It was just out of nowhere. I just popped in my head, and I was like, oh, I bet you everybody would like this. And then I start talking about their drive home, and his wife is going to be, oh, you were part of the show. And oh, I know, I was, everyone else, no one else is brave enough to do that. I know, but who's brave? You are, and then it evolves, and he'll be at work tomorrow morning bragging to his coworkers, and then I'd have him mopping. You should have seen me. And then he turns out he's in the bathroom, so he's knocking on the stall door. Are you almost done in there? When you're done, I'll buff your head for a nickel. I'm just kidding. That's part of my act. That's part of my act. And so it's just kind of you just keep building it. And I've done I've done that bit for 6 or 7 iterations of that, of putting him else other places. And so like a lot of times when I do that, he'll come up in the rest of my other bits, depending on who he is and what his job is and what I find out about him. So then he becomes a big part of the show. in so many different ways. And it's where he's like, it's too much. I don't want to be part of the show anymore. It's like too late. You're in, and then it's a different approach.
Did that happen like earlier in your career, or were you such a skilled improviser that then you riffed that whole?
That was later. Yeah, that was when I was, yeah, more experienced, and I knew the hack bit about, I don't go, where do you work, and there's all other versions of it, and then so I just was like, oh, I should do a more clever version of that.
Is that like if we're building like our Batman tool belt or whatever? One of the things you told me to learn is like what you call parachute bit, or if the bit doesn't work, use your persona to acknowledge why the bit didn't work, and then you basically have an out to try anything you want because if it doesn't work, you have a parachute to go, oh, professor, shouldn't that premise
Right.
got a laugh, and so it like makes you fearless if you have a parachute bit on
Especially if
why.
it's a adaptable parachute bit. Like your bit is adaptable. So yours it's a game. You're like, oh, I have a student, and the student is my audience, and then he's questioning my ability or skills, or he's questioning my ideas, my take, my punchline, or whatever. But he's doing it like a student would. So that's the game. But it's, the specifics are my comedy act, my comedy bit. That works well because you can keep calling it back, and if you're a good improviser, you can find funny specifics within each scenario, but apply that game.
Okay, so beside the tool belt and the parachute bit, what would you call this one? The heckler?
Like this one would be like,
Mm.
you make the heckler part of the show, so it'd be like heckler judo, I guess you could say, where
Okay.
you begin to turn it's like a negative into a positive, and then you heighten it to a level where they don't like the attention anymore. It's fun, but like I don't know that it works for a lot of different people. Like like a lot of people are more angry, when they get interrupted, so it's hard for them to be silly with people when, because they're like, shut the fuck up. So
What? Okay, I had this happen at a presentation this talking about taxes, and there was a bill that people were voting on that would maybe raise taxes by like $30 on and I had a very crotchety old man, middle of my presentation, just walk up in my face and just said, shame, and then walked out.
shame.
Just shame, like spit on me, and it got that close to my face and just said, shame on you. And just walked out. He was like so like triggered that he might have to pay $30 more in taxes that he couldn't even like sit through the presentation on the bill.
The real shame is his lack of mouthwash. Or you could have like leaned into the microphone and said, the password is shame.
People would have got that. Okay, yeah. Like
No,
what is that?
no,
That's a game called Password, isn't it?
yeah.
That's pretty good. Okay, so your brain instantly saw where in other situations would you lean in and whisper to somebody, and then you
Right.
tried to. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I see how your brain works like that.
Yeah. And you could just,
But it's
you can take it anywhere, you could, shame on you. Sir, we're not taking band name suggestions until later, but we'll put you down. Shame on you is a good band name. Good. Or whatever, like you just, or whatever club names, or you apply it to whatever you're doing. So it's your talk.
But then that gets me thinking if I'm gonna do like my parachute bit is the professor, there's someone asking me a question in the should I maybe do the same thing with my heckler kind of tool belt is I'll take questions at the end or let me finish my lecture before we get into the specifics of homework questions or
I would even do a different student commenting on the guy who's heckling. Professor, are we supposed
ah
to be aggressive toward you?
there
Whatever.
and do the same thing. Yeah.
And
Okay.
he's not raising his hand. Are we not supposed to raise our hand anymore? Kind of,
And that brings in my the same bit and the same persona.
and you could be like, Professor, do you need someone to back here to get your six? I have military skills. I can take him out. No, 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 that's okay. We're gonna let everybody. It's the First Amendment rights. I'm just saying I could slice his, you aorta, and he could bleed out and no one would hear it. Thank you. Thank you very much. But I think he's quiet now. You can tell he's quiet now. Whatever.
Seems like what is it like? How do you avoid confrontation? It's the Japanese art of tai chi. Is tai chi kind of redirecting someone's force that's coming at you,
I think that's it. Yeah.
or even the dance, right? You want to make them a dancing partner versus a combatant.
Right. Yeah. And again, that's accomplished through really good listening. Like you have to be a good listener, and then what you do with that is you misinterpret what you're hearing in a way that doesn't look good for him or her.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could give us like a list of ways of dealing with hecklers that you've developed over your 25-year career.
10 ways to handle a heckler. Well, the first one I have in the article is ignore them. And that's always, if you can do it, that's the best way. Just pretend like they're not even there. And then if you're working in a really good club, the club will take care of it. They'll have a bouncer come by and hush them. And if they do it again, they'll kick them out. So if you're, especially if you're anywhere in the beginning of the show, you're not the headliner, it's best to ignore them or leave it up to the MC to handle it. So that's, I mean, that's a pretty basic suggestion, which is, if you ignore it, it might go away. Another one I said, the number two way to handle a heckler is solve their problem. Sometimes someone's heckling because they can't hear. Sometimes it's because they don't have a drink yet. Sometimes it's because they misunderstood you. So just solve whatever it is that if
Mm.
they're challenged by something, you can have fun with the idea of correcting whatever it is that they are struggling with. So that involves finding out, asking a couple questions, and sometimes that can lead to some fun too. And then sometimes that's enough to get them to shut up. Go tit for tat, number three. That's where you suck, you swallow. That's where you are clever enough and you are experienced enough to have comebacks to whatever somebody is throwing out at you. That one is, like it really depends on your personality. If you're like I don't know, like for you, like it's not easy for you to be mean and then get back into your act. You're a nice guy, so it might backfire on you. Number four is have them immediately removed from the club. Sometimes you order a special drink. Could you give them the fuzzy nipple or whatever? And the bouncer knows to kick them out.
Did you actually have one of those like in different clubs that you worked across the country?
Oh
Was there
yeah,
like code words? Like,
sure. It's like 86, 86 this guy. It's the same thing and yeah, you have to because if it's a real comedy club, they don't like people have paid, $20 to come in and see the show. They don't want to hear you dealing with an asshole even if you do it really well. And that's the confusing part when you handle a heckler is if you're good at it, it feels like it's a good part of the show. So everyone's like, well, what's the big deal? You're making people laugh and it's a fun moment and it's like no it's a awkward icky moment of an interruption that I'm handling, but my show is better than you interrupting my show and me mocking you like that. Like I've spent a lot of time writing my jokes and preparing my act. I don't want to spend my time that you're paid for, swatting down idiots. So, but that's why sometimes it's tricky, to deal with different types of hecklers. Like a table full of women who are on a bachelorette party. Very tricky, but if you can do it correctly without insulting them, you can have a really good time. And then you get them on your side, and now they're listening, and now they're a big part of your, show. But that's tricky because they're all drunk and they want the attention to be about them.
yeah, that's what the one piece of advice I got from a local comic. I had a comic come and teach my coworkers how to deal with hecklers. Not that they do comedy, but they do public presentations, so it's the same skills. And her one best advice was, there's always that person that's the drunk bachelorette. She calls them the drunk bachelorette that just need to be acknowledged. Just acknowledge that they're part of a bachelorette party. And that's all they really want. They'll be quiet once you give them a little bit of acknowledgement.
Same with a
Uh,
birthday or same with an anniversary. And then, and that's what to the next one, number five, is to have some shutdown bits ready to go. So if you've been down that route before, you can have some, your mama jokes that shut them down pretty quickly. You could have like my bucket boy joke shuts them down pretty quickly. You can acknowledge them, and again, that goes back towards more like solving their problem. I need attention because we're having a special event. Okay, well here's a quick bit of attention. But the problem with that is there's a bunch of people having birthdays. There's a bunch of people
yeah.
celebrating anniversaries. There's a bunch of people who just graduated and all that stuff. So if you spend time on all of them, that's what the show becomes about. So that's why we, hesitate to do any of them. But yeah, you're right though. Sometimes it just needs to be done, and that gets it out of the way. And it's like, all of it is about experiences. Like you can begin to tell which ones are which case and apply that solution appropriately. Number six, I say use the heckler's words and timing and tone against them. So, you begin to, I never make fun of people's physical appearance. I never thought that was funny or clever or even nice, but I would use how they talk to me, the energy of their words, the choice of what they're choose to comment on and when in the show, and the fact that they even have the guts to talk in front of people. Like that was a big one for me. Was I would always do the other people in shock, like, we're allowed to talk to the comedian. I didn't know that. That was, okay, that, and then in a way sort of pointing out how ridiculous it is that this guy thought that.
Do you make sure you repeat what the heckler said? Because I thought that was a good piece of advice I picked up is because you heard the heckler say it, but the rest of the crowd might have not heard, and so your witty comeback won't make sense to anyone who didn't hear the first part of the exchange.
Exactly. And that's where you can begin to grant back some of the power too, is if you can repeat what they said, but you can misunderstand what they said. So you can say it a little bit differently. So it sounds kind of like what they said, but now it's embarrassing for them. You know, sir, we don't serve duck on our menu here, or whatever, instead of you suck or whatever. But no, I mean
Uh,
that's dumb. But you gotta, like, the point is you misinterpret what they say, and then it makes them look foolish, and then sometimes that's a funny way to do it. But yeah, always say what they said, because that gets everyone in on the joke. And that goes to even when it's not a heckler, when it's just somebody who you're talking to in the crowd. What do you do for a living? I'm an engineer. So, oh, you're an engineer. Okay, well,
okay,
that way everyone for sure heard it.
got it.
Number seven, I say, incorporate them into the show way too much. So that's sort of, if you're really talented and experienced, you can begin to, like Paula Poundstone would do that. And she would be just have them be part of the show. She would find out information about them and then insert them in just about every bit somehow in a way that's not flattering to them. And it would sort of like payback for interrupting.
I guess how many would you label as like go head to head with them, and how much would you label them of like doing the jujitsu move of like making sure you're still like the likable one in the exchange?
They all have like an element of both, for mine. I never, like there's a couple of them where you go tit for tat. And if you want to do that, if you're good at that, that's fine. Like if you're an insult comic or you're somebody who's quick on the playground kind of a thing, but that's what the heckler's good at. That's what they're like, that's why they're shouting
Like
out.
one.
So you're gonna say, I'm better at the game you're playing. And you will be, because you're sober, hopefully, and you have a microphone. So you have an advantage over that guy. But it could get out of hand pretty quickly. So that's why I always figured out like more judo moves to sort of take force and use it against them. So I'll find out their personal information. So you find out who they're with, who they're like what they're celebrating, where they work, what their favorite TV show is, or something about them. You just you look at their how they're dressed and look for clues, and then you just extrapolate those clues and heighten them, and then you call them back over and over again. And now he's the yellow tie guy, whatever, who wears a yellow tie. Are you related to Curious George or whatever? You just utilize what you've noticed about them. And then number nine is invade their physical privacy. You can't touch them, but you can like look at their purse. You can something on their drink, like a drink that's on their table. You can begin to phone. You can start to mess with what they have and make jokes out of what they look like, what their purse looks like, how full it is, some of the items that you pull out of it, or whatever. But that's risky, because if you break something of theirs, you're gonna have to pay for it. That might get them angry when you invade their physical space. So you got to be kind of careful. But I've done things where you pull out the purse and you just start. You have an entire Rolodex inside of your purse, like that there's one on your phone, right? Whatever. You can just start to have fun with that. And then the last one I have, number 10, is talk to their date. So now you can begin to empathize with the person who's with them, and just try to get them to shut them up, because you're being like, wow, I can see why you wanted to share him with the rest of us, or it's a scary thing to have somebody interrupt your show. And so you have to be kind of prepared to think on your feet when that happens. And you have to be prepared to stand your ground. And you have to remember that you have the microphone, you have the lights, you have the sound and the energy on your side. And so you have to really just listen and have a strategy in mind. And then you just practice. And in today's modern comedy world, you'll have plenty of practice because there's a lot of people like to heckle. We're posting these crowd work videos online so much now. It's always, so you don't burn your material as a comedian. So you post your crowd work online, but then that all that does is show people like it's okay to talk to me. I'll make
Yeah.
it really funny. And so they're like, I'm helping you. And it's like, you're not helping me. I'm showing you how good I am by countering your bullshit, but that doesn't mean it's a better show.
Yeah, that's another piece of advice I wrote down is like, don't automatically assume they're against you or they're a malicious heckler. In today's world, they think they're helping.
Yeah, and that's especially true nowadays, and some guys like James Gregory was a comedian, still a comedian, I think, and he was intolerant of hecklers. Like immediately throws you out. If you start talking back to him, he'll immediately throw you out and wait till the club throws you out, and then he'll continue on. And he was an actor, so he can get right back into his show, and it was fine. But most people are going to be a little bit more tolerant in it, and
Do you have any specific stories from your road
yeah,
days?
like I tend to not remember heckler stories. Oh yeah, I got one. The When I did my second Tonight Show, I went out and all of a sudden I heard it sounded like a blowhorn, like at a basketball game, like a
Yeah.
air horn. Someone had snuck an air horn into the studio audience and was blowing it so that they could hear themselves on TV, like because it's a recorded thing. So they blow it and then, and so on the final, and so talk about like throwing you off, like, where all of a sudden you're performing your act and you hear a blowhorn and then you can see everyone scrambling around looking for it, but they can't find it. So now that's happening while you're doing your show. So that's always fun. And yeah, so they of the final edit of the set, they toned it down and try to cut it out, but it's in there. You can hear it.
Really? In your second
Yeah.
set? So you didn't acknowledge it though, right? You just had a five that had planned to do, and you're in.
Yeah, on live TV, like it's the real instruction when it's not live TV because it's live to tape, but what they say is don't acknowledge the crowd that's in the room because the real crowd is everyone watching at home and they don't know what's happening there. So if you reference something there, it loses a millions of people.
Do you have heckler training from improv? Like, is there like a?
Yeah, because in improv, you're actually asking them to yell stuff out, and then you're using that as part of your show. But most improv audiences are theater audiences, and theater audiences aren't hecklers. They don't interrupt the show. They understand the fourth wall. They understand how to respect it, and typically they're not out there drinking. They're just showing up to the show and watching it. So it's a different experience, really. Comedians are the ones that really have to deal with the hecklers because you have alcohol and you have people. It's about being funny.
I was reading a book on debate this morning called Think Again by Adam Grant. And it's similar to the stuff you're talking about. I'm going to read you a quote from it. When someone becomes hostile, if you respond by viewing the argument as a war, you can either attack or retreat. If instead you treat it as a dance, you have another option. You can sidestep.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the judo.
So he's always in the last line, the more anger and hostility the other person expresses, the more curiosity and interest you should show.
Exactly. What you really don't like my material. Okay, that's cool. You remind me of my one like three of my last girlfriends. They would totally agree with you. You could just begin to listen and react to the thing that's being react to how, like I said, how it's being said, why it's being said, like start to read into that as opposed to what the person said. You've got a big nose. I see that you're somebody who's interested in fashion or whatever.
What would you say not to do? If you reframe this article, you gave us like some tips, to tricks, tactics, but what would you say never do? Is there a hard, fast, never do line?
Well, if it's a clean club, never swear, never let them get you into breaking the rules of what the club asked you to do. If it's a PG show or a G show, try to stick to that. I don't like to mock somebody's physical attributes. So if they're overweight or if they're, if they're bald, I can because I'm bald. But other than that, it's a cheap laugh and the crowd will always turn on you if you mock someone's, especially if it's a physical disability. And always make sure before you make fun of the way someone talks or is behaving, make sure that's not a physical disability. Because if you start talking about someone being drunk and it turns out they have CP, like now obviously that happened to once when I was doing a radio show in LA on CBS radio. This caller called in and sounded hammered, and my partner busted him for being hammered, and he's like, I have CP, and so we had to do a whole joke about messing that up, and he was cool. The guy was great. He was funny about it, but it was awkward because you just make an assumption. Oops, sorry about that.
Wouldn't ignore
um,
that one, right? Because it's like such a awkward elephant in the room that you have to
oh, you
call
have to
that
make
one.
fun of yourself for making that mistake. That's like the one guy I saw, a comedian, I can't remember his name, but he was making fun of somebody, and the guy says, "Oh well, because I have a lisp." He thought the guy was being fancy about how he was pronouncing something, but it was because he had a lisp. And he's like, "All right, you win. Nothing I can say now.
Just
Congratulations, good job. That was fun." And moving on. Yeah. So, and don't ever hit them. Don't ever get physical with them. That's a big no-no, especially nowadays. With all the lawsuits, you got to be really careful because, if someone comes up and tries to hurt you, you can of course defend yourself, but you can never let your anger get a hold of you and hurt somebody or touch somebody or at all, like a drink thrower, cup thrower, nothing like that. Because then they'll sue the club, and then that puts the club at a real disadvantage. And then word gets out that you're the guy that got that club to lose, their license or whatever.
I'm intimidated to do some of your tactics because some of the tactics seem like be veterans, or you need to have the confidence to kind of go tit for tat, or do the act out, or do the full, mop boy hour,
Sure,
minute.
ignore them would be one that I would suggest. Kick them out would be one I would suggest. Have some heckler lines memorized that you can throw at them that that you can do. So those would be like the beginner ones,
This is
when
my
you're
question.
new at it. Solve their problem, like figure out if they need a drink or if they can't see or if they can't hear because the microphone. Those are like the ones that if you're just starting out, you would use those.
Have you ever used, depends where they're sitting, but if they're sitting on like the side of the club, you can literally
Yep,
she'll just ignore you by body language. She'll just literally go "Mer," and like talk to the rest of the audience, and then suddenly, you in the corner, you're no longer part of
that's
the
actually
in.
in the article. Yeah, I said, what does it say? It's also especially effective when you are newer to the gig. Simply figure out where the heckler is sitting, then turn your body to the other side of the room and continue with your act. That gives the club staff the chance to whisper a warning to whoever started their shouting. So yeah, it's a very basic and classic way to handle it. Is you just start talking to the other side, and sometimes like again though, like the more experience you get, the more you can do that, but also talk about the person to that side of the crowd. Whoa, what's going on with that side of the crowd? Oh my God, they got that guy over there. Is he their leader? You would think the other people over there would shut him up because, but they're not. So they must be for him, huh? Okay. Well, we'll keep that in mind. I appreciate you guys over here. Well, these are the non-talkers. So thank you for that. Whatever. Like you have to be more experienced to have the confidence to do that kind of move.
I was seated in the very corner of the room when she demonstrated that with my colleagues, and it did feel like I was like, "What the hell?" Like it made me feel ostracized. But the way
Yeah.
she just did that and talked for another 2 or 3 minutes, I was like, "Hey, come on!" Like,
Well, and that's what the heckler wants. Like they want attention, and when you don't give that to them, it sometimes it chokes it out and it shuts them up.
are these is the same advice like when you can't half-ass do an act out. You either do hacked out 100%, otherwise the crowd feels it and like they're worse than not doing an act out when you do it like a half attempt. It's the same thing. Like if you're gonna try to go tit for tat or do the full bucket boy bit, you need to go all in.
For sure. Yeah, you got to. I think that's true with anything when it comes to comedy. Is you just have to always commit, and that's the people that are the funniest. And sometimes where the laughs come out of is, I've begun to commit, and I've heightened it, and I'm committing to that heighten, and therefore it lures them in. So yeah, it's lame if you don't commit. It's like anything. It's like making love. It's like dancing. It's like playing sports. You get hurt in sports. You get hurt if you don't commit. You can't half-ass, play ice hockey. Same with comedy. And that's the thing. If you watch people that are funny, they'll start off with something that might not be that funny, but they'll commit to it, and then they'll heighten it, and then they'll find other things about it and add to it and call back details about it. And now all of a sudden, because they've committed to that instead of bailed on it because you didn't get the laugh the first moment, it's become its own funny thing.
Is it different than, the comedy in early 90s, doing comedy today, all social media and stuff?
Yeah, the
Looks
social
to me,
media definitely is helps with, to me, that's with promotion and with getting a name so that if all of a sudden you've got a million views on your clip, like you can fill a room, and now you can use that to get a booking. Whereas before, if you didn't have TV, you couldn't really headline. And and to be honest, some of these people that have a lot million views can't headline either because they've got 5 minutes of funny stuff, and then headlining is different than just doing 45 minutes of 8 5-minute funny sets. Headlining is you're bringing a show, you're bringing a theme, you're bringing your real polished comedy lens, and it's memorable, and you're bringing stories that intertwine, not just joke, 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 joke. Or if it's joke, 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 you're bringing themes within those jokes, like Mitch Hedberg or Stephen Wright.
could you do what Bird did in Philadelphia and just sit on Rocky and the Liberty Bell and the Flyers and just badmouth Philadelphia for a 10-minute set just to piss?
I've done equivalent of that kind of a thing, like where you just have to
It was such a
bulldoze
bad crowd.
through. Yeah, you're literally trying to do your time so you can get paid. You just start talking about stuff, and you just start, and he was doing that because the crowd was aggressive and from what the story I heard is that they had mistreated every comic before him. And it really angered him when he saw the disrespect he was giving to his fellow craftsmen. And that's what really set him off and why he did all that. So to me, that was cool. Like he was sticking up for his brothers and sisters who were didn't have the skills or the balls or the material to fight a crowd like that, an aggressive, hateful crowd like that. It's a real privilege to attend a comedy show and to get laughs from somebody who you don't know and to see their act. It's like watching a Broadway show or like a singer, like a band. It's like they have a special gift. So watch them, like take it in and respect it. Let it
Right.
happen. Let other people enjoy it too. Don't try to grab attention from it. Don't try to interrupt it. Don't try to make it about you, and just enjoy it and let them do what they do. That they get paid really well to do what they do because they're really good at it. And if you let them do it, you can have a real good time. But that's where alcohol comes in a lot of times. It just
Right.
I think in most cases the best thing to do is to get the club to handle it. And then, if you're a really experienced comic, you can at least give it a try first and say, "Hey, I tried. I tried to get you to be quiet, but you won't. So now you have to leave." But really, what you have to do is you have to remember it's about the majority of the crowd. You have to think about them, and it's not about that one person, even though that one person wants it. And even if you can get the laugh, sometimes it's just not about that. It's you have to say that this crowd wants a show, and if you remember, the owner of the club is paying you to go in there to entertain these people, and so if they leave unhappy, you might not get booked back. It might be like you dropped the ball. These people took it. Took a chance on you, and all you did was talk to that one idiot. You should have let us get him out of there for you. It's tough. Yeah, I mean, and hecklers are cowards. They're people who aren't don't have the guts to get up on stage like you do and do the thing the right way. So they're interrupting. They're babies. They're children. So you have to remember that too and keep that in mind. Like you're dealing with a child, so children are tough to handle sometimes. They're unpredictable.
What if you get unpredictable and growling,
Yeah.
the dog heckler?
Hey,
What if
folks,
you
if you can keep your growling down to a minimum, we'd really appreciate that. There's other animals, there's turtles and fish here wanting to also hear the show. All right.
have you ever had a situation where like there'll be a heckler, but then the other people in the audience will turn on the heckler and you got almost like a audience versus heckler kind of interaction?
My sister called him into the other room. She could hear him heckling us. What was the question?
What happens if like you get three or four people involved and like there's one heckler and then you have like some other kind of dude that's like, hey, shut up, like you're ruining the crowd for us. What happens if you get cross crowd members fighting?
It's all on you, baby. Like if you started it, like like that's the. I mean, the real job is it's the club's job to remove hecklers. It's the club's job to keep the crowds quiet. And unless you beforehand say, you can talk to them beforehand and say, hey, listen, I really like to deal with hecklers myself before you do. So let me handle hecklers, and then if I say blah blah blah, order me a stinky foot, then that means I want them out of the room. But until you hear that, just let me handle them. And because sometimes if they make a big deal out of it, it makes it negative and it's hard to handle. So
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the same skills, like even like running presentations or running meetings. When you have someone, we have 15 minutes of questions, and you have one person who's bogarting the entire conversation. Or like I was on a Zoom, like it happened yesterday, where as a professor, I kind of have more of the skills to be assertive and to be like, okay, let's, this 15 minutes is for technical questions, not for ranting about X policy. But there is a level of kind of like, I felt a little rude, kind of like, but I guess I don't know, being assertive, there's a skill in being assertive, but being assertive that's not like it doesn't like smart you. It doesn't put people back on their haunches and make them feel like they've been slapped.
well, you think about it like a teacher. A teacher has to control the class. A grade school teacher, it has to control the class without insulting or being mean to these kids. And so you have to have a teacher voice. You have to have a tone that means I'm not messing around. And then you have to have the things that you want to say. So that's why it's nice to watch other people handle hecklers and pick and choose what you want until you develop your own style, your own abilities, and your own like sort of tools, tactics. Jimmy Carr is a great heckler handler. He's a tit for tat guy. He's a good one.
But
Um,
he plays that persona because he is a sarcastic dick, right? I
but
mean
he
that
also he dedicates part of his show to letting hecklers yell at him, and then he heckle like gets them back.
he's tit for tat. Is that what you said?
Yeah, he's a tit for tat guy, but he's got a lot of planned ones. What was the one I heard him use? But the one guy say his name is Bill, and Bill didn't like the show. So when's the comedy going to start? And he's like, well, see, sometimes people like things, and and it's for you, and sometimes it's not for you. And then he's like, and life doesn't always go. It's not always fair that way, and it sucks. It's like another big unfair thing is if a man decides to sleep around with a bunch of women, he's known as a stud. And if a woman decides to sleep around with a bunch of men, he's known as Bill's mom.
That's the thing.
Boom. Yeah, and then he's basically telling her your mom a joke, and he just circumvents all the way around, and then comes right back to your mom's a whore. So like that's like he had that bit all already in his head. So he's got a million of them because that's how he rolls. So that's you can be that guy too if you're good at that. And his comedy, he can go right back into his act because his act has that energy to it. So
Yeah, because you felt like he was back into one of his rhythm jokes, and then
totally.
suddenly it's this direction of the heckler. Is it tell tit for tat, or is he more of like I'm going to roast you? Is tit
Well,
for tat
tit for
different than
tat is kind
roasting?
of a roasting, anyways. Yeah,
Okay.
tit for tat is like you're so fat that blah blah blah. But yeah, I tell yeah, any of those New York comics, all of them are really good at roasting and really good at burning you, and they sometimes do it in a way that's like very clever and intelligent. They say it without saying it, and then we all come to the conclusion that you're a dumbass.
I had a heckler, but I was reading my kid's book to 3-year-olds, and so can you deal with a 3-year-old heckler that just says something like, "I have dinosaurs on my sleeping bag"? Could be
And
a
I
bit
have hair
about
on
like
my
that's.
balls, but neither of them applies to what we're talking about right now. Now,
That's
I don't know what
crazy.
you do with kids; it's different. I mean, kids.
But I think that's a premise in itself. Like that's one heckler I can't deal with. Like I'll show you an example of how I deal with the town hall heckler or the comedy heckler, but I don't know what to deal with.
Like it'd be funny to hear you dealing with a kid the way you deal with a real heckler and really insult them and use swear words and talk about their mother and and then you might find out afterwards that it's a 5-year-old. You do a bait and switch. I had this one heckler the other day. He was saying something about
Ah,
dinosaurs. I'm like, hey, you whore. And if in his
and it
defense,
kicked me
he's
out of the
5, so he
nursery.
started to cry. But still, you don't interrupt me.
The
It'd be like,
bait and switch it.
yeah.
Okay.